Welcome, fifth grade, to Unit 2 in our math. Unit 2 is all about geometry. And geometry is the study of shapes and measurement. And so we are going to be taking a look at area and perimeter in this unit. Okay, so that's kind of our goal. And today we're going to really focus on area and what it is, how we measure it, as we get ourselves ready to explore this subject. Area is a really important thing to know. It's really important because we use it all the time in our life, right? We use area all the time, whether it's covering a floor with carpet or a rug, knowing how big something is. We use area all the time when we're doing things like painting, trying to figure out how much of a wall we're going to cover. When we ship things, we think about the area in the back of a truck or how much something will take up, how much space it will take up. We talk about when we build decks, you might measure for area, both in creating and building the wood part of the deck and also in staining it or painting it when you're done. It's a really, really important skill to have, and it's a skill we use all the time. I moved into my house. When you own a house, I've used area more than I can count in the past year. Okay, so what is area? Well, area is the amount of space inside the boundary of a flat, two-dimensional object. Okay, so how much space takes up the inside of a shape or of an object? Now, what I want you to do now is I want you to pause this video and I want you to go to your Avid Journal. Open up to your math section and you're going to take some notes today. And your first thing you're going to take for a note is you're going to write the word area down and you're going to put this definition in it so you can kind of recall it back later. All right, so pause the video, go write what area is in your Avid Journal in your math section. See you back here in a few moments. All right, welcome back. Let's start diving into it. So like I said, with area, we're looking at how much space the inside of a shape can take. All right, so the inside of if we had a rug, the inside of it would be everything inside of there. Now in our definition, it talked about how it is a two-dimensional shape. When we talk about dimensions, we talk think of it as like sides, okay? And with something flat, we have two things that we're going to measure. All right, we're going to measure kind of this side way up here, the top and the bottom. We call that the length, right? How long something is. That's our first dimension, our length, okay? Then we also have this up and down. Ready? How wide something is, we call that the width. And we say that area is for a two-dimensional shape because we're measuring two things. We're measuring the dimension of length and also the dimension of width. Those are the two different measurements we need to solve area. Now, when we get into three different shapes, we have how tall something is, which is why we call them 3D shapes, three-dimensional shapes. And we will talk more about that later this year. But for area and perimeter, this unit, we're going to be dealing with flat shapes, two-dimensional shapes that only have how long they are, only have how wide they are. So they only have length and width. Okay? So if we were looking at a flat shape, we have the length one way. I'm just going to put L at the top for length. We have the width, how wide it is. When we deal with area, we deal with something called square units. Whether we're measuring in centimeters or inches or miles or decimeters, there's so many different ways that we can measure things. We always, no matter what we are measuring in, when we deal with area, we measure in that, but in a square unit. So if we were measuring in centimeters for area, we would be measuring area in square centimeters. If the length and the width we were measuring in inches for area, we would call that square inches. And that's because what we are doing when we are measuring for area is we're actually creating these little squares on there, right? We have the length, we have the width, and if we were measuring in inches, and we actually took and we measured out every single inch in the length, every single inch in the width, we would kind of create these little squares on top of whatever we were measuring. So we call them square units because when we measure area, what we are doing is creating little squares on the inside and counting up how many little squares take up that spot. Okay? So let's think about a problem. So let's say we were measuring a wall or we were measuring a piece of paper. Makes more sense maybe because we're working with centimeters. Let's say we're measuring this little piece of paper. I get out my ruler and I'm going to measure in centimeters. All right? So I first measure the length, and the length was 5 centimeters. I measured the width, and it was 3 centimeters long. Okay? So if we have these little squares drawn for us, it's pretty easy. To count, to get the area, all we would have to do is just count up those squares. So I can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we would say the area of that piece of paper is 15 square centimeters. Now we write square units a little bit different. We put what we are measuring in centimeters, then we put this little floating 2. A little floating 2 in math means, hey, square. So I would read this as 15 square centimeters. Okay. Now you might notice something that we're going to talk about. All right. You might think, well, pieces of paper, walls, carpet don't always have squares. And some of you are probably already noticing that with our total 15, you see that it's 5 and 3, and that 5 times 3 equals 15. If you notice that, you're on to something. We can use multiplication to make this a lot easier. We don't have to draw the squares on everything. In fact, in many cases, we can't draw the squares on everything, so we have to be able to do it mathematically. All right, so let's do another one. Let's say this is now a big wall that I want to paint. I need to know the area so I know how much paint I need to buy. I don't want to buy too much paint. I don't want to buy too little paint and have to run back to the store. So I do some measuring. And let's say I measure the width first, and it is 5 feet, 5 feet wide, okay, or 5 feet long. I'm sorry, 5 feet long. And then I measure up and down. I measure the length or the width of it, and I see that it's 5 feet tall. Okay. Now, like I said, if the squares are there, I could easily just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So my area is 20 square feet. Because remember, whenever we are dealing with area, we always make it a square unit. So I would put feet with that little floating 2, which makes it square. Now you might notice again, 5 and 4, 5 times 4 equals 20. So when we don't have the squares, but all we have to do is measure those 2 dimensions. We have to measure the length and the width. And once we find those numbers, all we have to do is multiply the length times the width to get the area. Okay. Now you notice that there are 4 sides. So if I know this left side is 10, I know this right side is 10 too, but I don't need to multiply them all together. I just need one of the 2 lengths and one of the two widths. All right, so if I was going to find the area of this shape, I would take 10 times 4, which gets me 40. I'm measuring in inches, so I'd go inches. And because it's area, we need to make those inches square units. So it'd be 40 inches squared for this rectangle right over here. On this other one, you can see we've measured those two dimensioned. We've measured one of the lengths, one of the widths, and all we have to do is multiply them together. 8 times 9 equals 72. So that means the area of this equals 72. They measured in centimeters, and it is square units, so centimeters square. So when you write your answer, it is very, very important with area that you put a label. You don't just put 72, because if you are dealing with area and you don't know what you are measuring in, you could get a really, really different answer and you could run into a lot of problems. If I was measuring in centimeters, but I only said, oh, my area is 72, someone else might go, oh, were you measuring in inches? And they might buy or get something completely wrong without the shape. That is very important to put on the end. Okay? So what you're going to do today is you're going to simply get some problems on your formative that are, some will have the squares, some will not. And your goal is to solve for the area, making sure that you are looking for that unit, what we are measuring in, and making sure that you put the little 2 at the end so that you can put square centimeters or square inches or square miles. Okay, so we are dealing with area, trying to really lock that down. Tomorrow's lesson, we will deal with perimeter. And then we will talk a lot about shapes. Now, this shape is easy. These are rectangles and they are squares. But there are a lot of times in life we get to shapes that aren't perfect rectangles and squares. So we're going to learn how we battle and how we take on those types of problems. All right. Thank you so much for listening. And I wish you good luck in trying to solve your area problems. Talk to you tomorrow.